Hej! Vad synd att vi ses. Jag hade helst inte velat behöva se här. Jag hade helst inte velat behöva ha en ukrainsk hubb. Men nu finns det ett behov av det. Och då är jag väldigt glad att ni kommer hit. Att vi har 130 talare den här veckan. Att vi har 55 event som handlar om Ukraina ur olika aspekter. Det handlar om politik, det handlar om NATO, det handlar om EU, det handlar om barnen, det handlar om krigsbrott, det handlar om fackföreningars organisationer, det handlar om att göra business. Vi är väldigt glada att vi under den här veckan kommer med UDs representant som är Sveriges särskilda sändebud för Ukraina. Han kommer vara här i hubben ganska mycket. Vi har även med oss väldigt många ledare från olika organisationer eller i toppskiktet eller vad ska jag säga, representanter som har stor kunskap om Ukraina från organisationerna. Vi är jätteglada för det. Och ni kan i efterhand se de här eventen. Och det är så att vi livestreamar de här. Är det någon som verkligen inte vill kunna synas i livestreamen så skulle jag rekommendera att sitta längst bak. Ni sitter ju bakifrån så det funkar. Och det här betyder också att man i efterhand kan gå in och se. För det här kommer vara så bra att ni vill se det 3 gånger. Och är det inte så bra, eller men när det är så bra ska ni också dela det till vänner. Och alla event livestreamas och finns genom programmet här. Så, som säkerhetsansvarig och ansvarig för hubben så vill jag tala om en sak. Om vi måste utrymma så är ni en del av hela hubben. Och då har vi en återsamlingsplats i hörnet där borta vid den stora vita yachten. Det är inte min, jag bjuder inte på någonting där. Men där är återsamlingsplatsen om det skulle hända någonting. Då ska alla gå dit. Vi hoppas ju givetvis inte att det händer någonting. Och jag vill också säga det att när vi gick ut och skulle tänka på hur ska vi göra det här så måste vi ha sponsorer, vi är alla volontärer. Och det är ganska häftigt att se att över 500 privatpersoner har donerat pengar för att vi ska vara här. Det är ganska skönt att ha i ryggen, plus ett antal företag som är med. Och det tycker vi är jättefint. Och de vet om att vi gör stor nytta med våra samtal. Och ett av syftena med våra samtal det är att förena människor, att få nya kontakter och att kunna skapa en nätverk för att kunna skapa ännu bättre stöd för Ukraina. Och jag vill hoppas att ni tar er tid och går runt här och tittar, pratar med alla organisationer. Jag gjorde lite reklam för att vet man alla hörde. 5:00 kommer vi visa film och ha en panel där vi har ukrainare med på länk som handlar om cultural forces. Det är alltså soldater som använder kulturen som drivkraft och som stöd till att stötta försvaret. Och det här är ju otroligt viktigt för det är någonting som ryssarna vill så är det ju förgöra den ukrainska kulturen. Det är att förgöra det ukrainska språket. Det är att förgöra allting vad som är ukrainskt. Så att lyfta kulturen som de här gör. De har över 200 event per månad som handlar då om att använda kulturen för att stärka försvaret av landet. But with these words, we have a very, very competent panel here today. And we have an extremely competent moderator. And Alina, she is heading up the organization Nordic Ukraine Forum. Nordic Ukraine Forum has existed since 2014. And all volunteer organizations supporting Ukraine see them as kind of a spider in the net. Because they have connected, they have increased the interest. Whenever we need a connection, we know who to call and they will help us. You arrange a lot of conferences, a lot of talk, lectures, events. And they also arrange the big big manifestations every year on Sergels Torg in support of Ukraine. And you do so much. So I think she should have an applause before we even start. So it's an honor to hand you the microphone.
Thank you very much, Sven, for this absolutely astonishing presentation. So I'm very glad that we have such guests, and we don't have much time. So let me introduce everyone here, and then we have a very important discussion: Path to Peace, Ukrainian victory or negotiations. So I would like to introduce our speakers. Yuri Kozik, who is the head of NGO Evolve. Then we have Lalch Wilderan, probably who doesn't need the introduction. He is a famous writer and he is the blogger perhaps you learn a lot about Ukraine from his blogs, don't you, Cornucopia? So Lars, pleasure to see you here today with us. Then we have Roman Mihaltsov, who is representing the Heritage and Revival Fund of Gammal-Svensk-Bu. And also Roman is part of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, who came only yesterday from the front line. Then we have Karolina Vendel-Palin, who is the Research Director, Russian Security Policy and Cyber Strategies from the Swedish Defense Research Agency. And last not least, we have Prince, combat medic, who came straight also from the front line. Such a great honor to have you all here. So, well, peace or negotiation. So basically, if we are talking about such big issues, let's first decide for us what you understand under peace. What does it mean to you? And well, all of you have been in the Ukraine cause for a while, and did this notion of peace and understanding of peace has changed through the last 3.5 years in the large-scale invasion? So what do you understand under this storm? Who would like to start? Any volunteer? Yep. Would you like? Yeah.
Oh, hello, everyone. So I will talk about Ukrainians as a Ukrainian, of course. For Ukrainians, peace is obviously a victory. But what is victory? It's a most complicated question. I think that no one in Ukraine talking about 1991 borders anymore, because we see how the situation is going. But for me, my personal opinion is that victory for Ukraine will be if, in the end of the war, Ukraine remains as independent state, and Ukrainian people, Ukrainian nation still live on the Ukrainian territories. Because that's the real goal of Russian war in Ukraine. This war never been about territories or any occupied territories. The real goal is to erase Ukrainian state and to kill Ukrainian civilians on the Ukrainian land or force them to move and leave these lands so Russia can just move Russians there as they do for 300 years straight. So yeah, that's the understanding of peace for me. If we can limit Russian ability of future aggression of Ukraine, that will be a victory, and that will be a peace, only possible peace for Ukrainian land now.
Well, thank you. I have the very ungrateful task of giving the Russian perspective. It's always a grim task because, as Prince said, their goal is to dominate all of Ukraine. But even, I would say, if Russia were to achieve that goal, they would not be satisfied because they consider themselves at war with the West in Ukraine. So even that would only be a phase in what they see as a long-term confrontation with the West.
Good afternoon. What peace, what of my opinion and my friends and comrades, what I want to say. Today I speak as a, not as a civilian, as a soldier. I took part of the battles in Kherson, Mykolaiv, Zaporizhia, Kharkiv, Bakhmut, some of the toughest battles in this war. I was an ordinary infantryman at the front line. I saw life under the fire and death in silence. I buried my friends. I carried the death over my hands. This is the price we pay for that. That's why I must speak honestly. There are no real peace without victory. You cannot negotiate with those who call your nation a mistake, who kill civilians, who bomb our kindergartens. You cannot negotiate with this. You not make peace with those who came and destroy you. First, you stop them and only after that you can talk about the peace or some compromise. It's very simple. Some people at Ukraine say, just not only Ukraine, you should find a compromise. But compromise means betraying the falling. It's first. It means telling the aggressor, it is okay, you will get away, who is next one, if you will find a compromise at the moment. We're not fighting just for the land. We're fighting for the living to free, nothing else. I served alongside with a lot of people who fighting just not for the, because they love the war. They fighting because they want to live free, because they love it alive. They believe peace must be not just cheap and not fake, but earned, protected, and respected. So I ask you, all of you, help us not freeze this war, help us win this war, but win not for revenge, but for peace. Not just for Ukrainian, but for every country that could be next one. Thanks.
Peace is lasting and not a compromise, and should never be. And peace is not about the end of violence, it's about the security of the future. And therefore, I must concur with that the only way to a real peace is victory. Anything else than a thoroughly defeated Russia, it will just be a pause until the next war. And I can go into that further on, but the Kremlin named me as a European hawk, so I feel I'm obliged to say this. Russia needs to be defeated so we can have a high-quality, lasting peace where people can realize their own futures without compromise. So that's peace for me.
It's a little bit hard to add something new to these excellent points that have been brought, but I would like to speak more on this sort of theoretical international politics level, where I would say, and I would prefer to abstain from defining how exactly this victory should take place, whether it should be one big military defeat, whether the Russian economy should finally, if ever, collapse under the sanctions. But the ultimate goal here is to bring Russia, which is the actor who brought realpolitik approach and the power first approach to Europe again, to teach them the lesson and bring them back into the realm of the international order. And we have a very good example in Europe where it has been done with Germany in 1945. So the Ukrainian victory would be Russia learning the lessons in the way as Germans have done, and then learning from the past and abandoning their practices.
You mentioned the defeat of Germany and also similarly the defeat of Japan, and that's a very important lesson because the defeat of both those countries ended up with the victors marching down unter den Linden and marching through Tokyo and then occupying Japan and Germany for something like 20 years and actively working with democratization of these countries. So it's not just kick Russia out of Ukraine. That's not the same thing as the German defeat in World War II. And it's very difficult to see that we actually, even if we wanted that the Ukrainians will march down the Red Square, although that will be a true victory, and then occupy Russia. So therefore, I'm afraid that we will just get a temporary victory, like in after World War I, where eventually the Germans start Second War, which ended up with a complete surrender, and that was the only way to stop this. So we have one way to achieve that lasting peace once Russia is defeated, and that is to not to massively increase our defense, so Russia will not attack again. However, as we saw in February 24th, 2022, even though they have no prospect of an actual victory, they can still attack because they're a dictatorship, and dictatorships don't have the correct information because people are afraid of telling the truth to their leaders. So even if we have a massive defense, they can still attack us, and they can also divide us, because while we are democracies, which is preferably to everything else, there will always be, like after the First World War, a point where someone says, we don't need the defense spending, we can put this money on the next thing which is important in the next election. And then we scrap our defenses, and then we're back where we are right now, defenseless. So we need to see how we can defeat Russia and how we can increase defense spending further on to prevent a further war. That includes Ukraine. So.
Yeah, just very quick. Yeah, I completely agree. The questions are the perspective that we take. Do we take the perspective of this year, all the discussions about the ceasefire, or the ultimate goal? And the ultimate goal definitely cannot be achieved by the same means that has been achieved against the Nazi Germany, because we basically saw the whole world united with armed forces being sent to Europe, for example, by Americans. And now we have a little bit of a different picture of our Western allies and their support. So probably a combination of sanctions and other long-term measures will help us hopefully achieve that goal. Not this year, maybe not in 5 years, but at least in the future as our ultimate goal and understanding of victory in this situation.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with colleagues. Because I think the biggest mistake after World War II was that the world believed that we defeated an ultimate evil, but we didn't defeat them because we left one evil to exist, and this evil was Soviet Union, and which lately turned to Russia, and the half of the world just closed their eyes because they didn't want to conduct war anymore, and said, yeah, the evil is defeated, and we believed in it. And that's the biggest problem. That's why we have wars now. That's why we never had 10 years without a war on this planet after World War II. But we just pretended that it's peaceful times. It never been. And that's the problem. I think the ultimate goal, like ultimate peace, cannot be achieved. And we need to understand this. And we need to always be ready for a new war. And we need to be always ready to protect our countries and what we believe in. Not just on a paper, not on just high speeches, but with actions. And I think the only way for at least some years of lasting peace, it's to defeat Russia economically. Because Russia do not start wars when their people don't have bread. That's easy, because they are living by medieval standards. We need to understand them, we need to fight them according to that standards. If they cannot start new war, they will not. So we need to remain the sanctions. And there are 2 points for at least lasting peace. That's sanctions on Russia, their cut economy, and strong European and Ukrainian armies. Russia need to understand that the price will be too high for them to pay. And their people will be left without the bread, and they will go and turn their heads from the enemy to enemy in Kremlin.
Thank you. And thank you a lot. And basically, so you mentioned there that we need to defeat, Russia need to be defeated, and that should be done also economically. So I wanted to ask Carolina, well, probably this is the most popular question to you, but it is crucial for all of us to know. So if you could evaluate in a couple of minutes the Russian economy and tell us how long can it be stable like this, how flexible it is, and what can we do to actually make Russia stop producing weapons and be capable of going further?
Thank you. Again, I don't have very optimistic messages from watching Russia. I think very often we ask the question, so when will Russia's military be reconstituted? When will it be strong again? Well, it depends on what we do. It's not just what Russia does, it's what we do as well. So it's very difficult to give an absolute answer. But the short answer is, certainly in, I think, a 3-year perspective, perhaps even longer, Russia will not run out of money. And it has considerable natural resources, it has its defense industry, it's always built a defense industry that's supposed to be able to produce weapons and equipment without having to rely on other countries. I mean, this has been a policy for decades, even during the Soviet Union. So it's something that we have to understand. I think we have to understand the task that is before us, not engage in wishful thinking. We've been doing that for too long. Having said that, one of the problems for Russia is definitely the fact that they're technologically backward compared to the West, but also compared to China today. And they're completely dependent on China. They used to be able to balance their dependencies. Now they cannot do that anymore. One of the goals with this whole negotiation theater that we've been seeing about a ceasefire for Russia is to see the West divided and to achieve a crack in the sanctions regime. That's absolutely imperative for them, for the economy in a long-term perspective. Having said that, this is a country where war with the West and war in Ukraine dimensions just about everything, certainly the economy. The minute that Russia stops pouring money into the defense industry and into paying soldiers and their families, they risk having an economic crisis, which could then turn into a political crisis. That's the nightmare for the Russian political leadership. They've increased repression to a degree that, I mean, it was bad before 2022. Now it's just unheard of. And trying to lift repression is also very, it's a high-risk venture for a dictator. They're educating their youth. They're trying to build a sense of patriotism from even in kindergarten. They have realist goals when it comes to pushing back NATO in Europe and having a sphere of interest in Europe where Ukraine is a critical part. But there's also some mystique in this. They're convinced if they are allowed to, for example, get a ceasefire that basically what they're demanding is a Minsk III agreement where Russia has control over all of the stages in the agreement. That will just increase their sense of that justice, truth, time and history is on their side. This is something that Putin keeps repeating. History is on Russia's side. He's building a future in history for his people. Let's not underestimate how very important this is in Russia and the task that we stand before. Yeah, I'll stop there. It's not very optimistic, I'm afraid.
Please, Lars, and then
One must also realize that Putin has been building Russia towards this since he became president, and it's not just turn these things off. It's been basically preparing the country for war for 20 years, including brainwashing, propaganda, militarization of schools and the system, and so on. So people, those who have opposed this, or more or less, have left the country, or are in prison, or are dead. So it's not the Russian people, in a way, supports this. That might not have been their own idea, but they have been brainwashed, or influenced by the dictatorship for 20 years. So they won't just turn and change ways just because Putin leaves. It's maybe even someone even worse might take over. So it's not easy.
I just would like to emphasize specifically the point brought by you, Carolina, because I think it is very important, and it doesn't sound very nice and nobody's happy to talk about it, but we really should talk about it. I remember when just the war started, we had this nice club with venture capital investors, and they told me, well, it's going to be over in a few months.
The sister of my grandmother called her and said her, "We're gonna save you. Don't worry. Yeah, we're dropping bomb on you. We're gonna save you. Don't worry. Sluba, we're going to save you." And she's saying like, "Don't save me. I'm living okay. Get out of my country." And she's like, "No, you're raping children and women and men as well. Even that it's very anti-gay country, they enjoying raping men because it's their way to show dominance. That's the kind of enemy we have. That's the kind of neighbor we all have. That's a reality which we need to accept and be prepared for this. That's not Putin war. That's Russian war against Ukraine and against Europe and everything that Europe and European values represent.
Well, and so you mentioned that it's very difficult times. I mean, clearly it's a war that affects everyone, and it's a very bloody war. So, but where are we now? Do you think that we can basically, how will look the European security in a couple of years if we will continue working the way we are? So, in this question, you have two basically, from your perspective, to tell how do you see the conditions of like support of Ukraine, or from your military perspective, how it is on the ground with the successes or with the conditions, and how will this war look in a couple of years and European security if we continue this way? Is there any volunteer who would like to share the experience? Come on.
For my opinion, I can tell you where is we now. Yeah, at the moment, Ukrainians still fighting for survival and their socialities. It's easy. Yeah, Europe is still continuously watching of the front line how they're moving. What I want to say, Europe must be mobilizing and invest not only in the army, on also in social sector. It's very important because I not be on first day the military. I've been on social sector. Then I come to the armies as a soldier. And also, it's one of important things. And world now is testing the international law. It's working or not, and who is win. But already we see, it's no any result. International law already not working. So, it's my opinion. We stay on this. First, mobilize, invest security, social sector, and to be ready. Because if we freeze this war, our children will have paid for that. Believe me.
Yeah, I truly believe that every year in Ukraine will cost Western world and the world in general more and more pain and violence and more conflicts. We already see it. We see Iran, we see Palestine. It's happening because dictatorships in the world, they see that they are untouched. They see that international law is not existing for them. They see that they are almost gods. They see that democracy are silent. They see that democracy are very slow. They talk a lot, but their high speeches usually not followed by right actions. Like for example, a few weeks ago when the Western leaders gathered together and they called Donald Trump and they gave this really high speech that they are giving 24 hours to Putin to accept ceasefire, otherwise they will put devastating sanctions. And then 24 hours passed, Putin didn't react at all. And what they did, they said, okay, now we're giving you 2 weeks, and 2 weeks passed, and now they're giving months. I don't know how much time they give to Russia now, but every time Western leaders do these high speeches, which not are followed by actions, I just hear how loudly they're laughing in Kremlin on you and on Western world in general. So I believe that if Western world is not mobilized mentally, economically, socially, then yes, every year we will see new conflicts, we will see war in Europe. It's already on Europe, but we will see war on NATO territory, like primarily Baltic states or Poland. They already, let's say, checking your ability to protect borders. They testing you with handmade migrants crisis and everything. They testing you, they watching you, and you have your own intelligence. You see what they are preparing for, you see what their military sector are preparing for. So I will not tell you scary stories, you have your very own eyes.
So I'll continue on the same theme. I'm an expert on Russia rather than European security. But what I usually do is I say, well, I'll tell you what Russia thinks of us. Russia is not impressed when we make strong statements. Personally, I remember the Kremlin, they were saying basically that, yeah, they'll toast in champagne and say Slava Ukraini, but they'll leave you. They'll leave you when it becomes too expensive or too difficult. This is the Kremlin view today as well. They will not be impressed by statements, but they will be impressed if we actually put money in our defense industry and start procuring military weapons and equipment. They look out over Europe and they see no big recruitment campaigns for the army. They see no serious debate about conscription in the large countries like France, UK, Germany. Even after you have these conversations about conscription, I mean, getting it through parliament and everything will take years. In a long-term perspective, I think Russia is worried. NATO is definitely stronger once it starts to build its armies. The Russian economy is under pressure. This is an aging leadership, and I'm not just talking about Putin. The average age in the inner circle of the Security Council is 69 years. It's going to be 75 next time he's elected president. The only thing that Putin can offer his population is more war and hardship. Therefore, I'm worried in a short-term perspective, because Russia could actually see a window of opportunity. And they see a divided West. As long as Trump is president, they can hope for this gulf between Europe and the US to become wider. So they're going to they're going to probe our resolve, just as Prince said. They're convinced that the West is weak. And that's why they'll create different dilemmas in Europe, especially military ones, I would say.
Yeah, definitely agree with the both short-term assessment of the risks, but also the need for the long-term thinking. And here I would like to also emphasize another message, because we sort of tend to discuss a lot about what Ukraine needs and how we should support Ukraine. I would like actually to turn this around to say that, well, if you are really take seriously your security in NATO and the West, you need Ukraine, and you need Ukraine that is standing, the Ukraine that is fighting, and you need all the experience that Ukraine has that nobody else in the world has, because only Ukraine now has experience of fighting a very strong adversary who is on still pretty strong economic and also technological level, and nobody else has that. So for our common security, it's not only that Ukraine needs you, it's also that you need Ukraine.
Just to put that in perspective, the discussion that we had in Europe about sending a peace force to Ukraine. I mean, the numbers are not very impressive, I think, if you sit in Moscow and watch the discussion. To send 20,000 men to a country that has 110 or 111 brigades, I mean, it's at most it's a tripwire force.
Indeed, yeah, that doesn't sound really serious, and it was mentioned already by Roman about the consequences of the frozen conflict. So I wanted to ask you on your vision of basically what will it cost both for Ukraine and for Europe to have their frozen conflict? And if you see any possibility for negotiations, if they can be successful in any constellation. They were mentioning that they are not, but we hear a lot, like some push us to have this representation of having their negotiations.
So yeah, I wanted to add to what Lars said. Democracy is weaker than dictatorships in making decisions. And that's the weakness of democracy. We need long discussions, we need a lot of time to make a simple decision. And if we will have a pause, Russia will use this pause to strengthen their army, to strengthen their economy. The biggest friend of Russia, which is now sitting in the White House, will help their friend to lift the sanctions, to economically recover. They waiting for this pause. The only reason we are talking about negotiations is because friend of Russia, which is sitting in White House, wants a pause, wants a fake ceasefire deal so he can finally start trading and digging in Russia. That's the only reason. They don't care about any values, any democracy, all the stuff you are discussing here on Almedalen. That's not about current American administrations. They are not democratic country in that way, in the way of values now. So the pause will be a terrible decision and a terrible history page for Europe and for Ukraine, because I know for sure that in Ukraine it will cause a lot of political discussions, election, fighting between parties and everything. Like, we have Ukrainian history book to see that it's happened a lot in our history. In any country it would happen the same. And the same on the West. You will spend this time fighting each other, on debates, but you will not spend this time to strengthen your army as Russia do. Russia is able to strengthen their army during the war in Ukraine. Their economy working fully on ammunition and mass drone productions. They are not relying on Iran anymore, how they relied in 2022. They producing Shaheeds, which destroying Ukrainian houses every night on Russian land. They are not relying on Korea anymore. Everyone was laughing, they are taking rockets from Korea. Now they produce them in Russia, and they use Korean technology and Korean people. And that's the biggest danger for us, because this pause will be used by Russia, right? And I think we are not in the same position to have this pause.
Thanks. We have 5 minutes left, but I wanted to open the floor, and if you have comments, questions, and you would like to ask anything, please just raise your hand, if any. While you're thinking, if you would like, so as far as I understood, what shall be do, what can be done, as far as I understood, defense in the investment, mobilization of their social society and generally the society, sanctions. What else? What can be done from the Swedish perspective, from the Ukrainian perspective, from the perspective of the specialist on Russia? Yeah? You, please.
I think for the rest of the Western world now, short-term goal is to try to hold America on the democratic side, try to hold Donald Trump on democratic side, not allow him to lift the sanctions, not allow him to trade his country to the Russia and Russian government. That's a short-term goal. If we survive it, hopefully America returns to their normality, and then we can plan long-term actions to achieve long-term.
What we should do, yeah. First, very simple. What we're saying, beginning of this war, 2022. Just continuously to finish this war, we need tools. Tools, it means we need weapons. Same from 2022. We repeat again. We need weapons. Just give us weapons. Believe me, all guys in the fronts, they know if they give more weapons when Europe at 6 months, first 6 months, 2022 was adopted. Give it, not give it, they afraid. We're finished this war of first 6 months of 2022. Now we're still continuously, okay, this is long war. We need again weapons, and also about the pause and everything. I want to just edit what my friends say, everything. This pause they using for just for groups and strike. And believe me, they just see, they know they already failed in Ukrainian. Who is the next one? Because they not give any success of second time. And who is the next? They can choose Baltic, Sweden, Norway, Poland, whatever. But with the pause, yeah, they just using for groups and strike again. Who is next one? I don't know. But thanks.
I mean, I'll be very specific. When you read the Russian memorandum, their proposal for a Minsk III in effect, the one thing that stands out that they will not allow is for Ukraine to be able to defend it themselves. Very often when we talk about ceasefire or peace, we start talking about territorial concessions, as if this is the most important point. But I'm convinced that the moot point will always be Ukraine's ability to defend itself. This is what Russia wants to undermine. So any way that we can help that creates problems for Russia. If we, on top of that, also arm ourselves, build strong national armies in our countries, we create dilemmas for Russia. And of course, the whole idea with having a strong military is so that you don't have to use it in the future.
I just want to repeat one phrase which I already said in Sweden when I was on the Power Project and had a speech on Monday's demonstration. I can convince you that this war and help in Ukraine might seem expensive now, but these expenses are nothing compared to lives of your own children, to lives of your friends, to lives of your loved ones, which we are losing with this war. It's nothing compared to that price that Ukraine are paying. So it's much less expensive for you now to spend more money, to send more weapons to Ukraine, than one day send your own children to Ukraine or to fight for Sweden. Hopefully, never, but we never know with such neighbor. So that's a great point which you just said. You build a strong military and strong army, so this army doesn't need to fight.
Yeah, so there's one thing we can do which no one really ever talks about, and that's actually to escalate while we still have time. And we could do, for example, cut off the life vein of Russia, the Baltic Sea. We would break some international conventions, but supposedly that we mobilize NATO troops and send to the Baltic states so they can really be defended. Then we just cut straight through Denmark and Öresund, and for all traffic on Russia. That will create a military dilemma for Russia. It will crush their economy, so they have to react. And if they react, their fleet will go to the ground, to the seafloor of the Baltic states. They have no possibility of winning a shooting war in the Baltic Sea against NATO. So they can choose between losing big or having their economy crushed. Otherwise, they can still just continue to build up and eventually attack further on when they're stronger. So we could escalate and try to see what they actually do. But I don't think any leading politicians in the West have the guts to actually escalate. And that escalation would still be non-lethal. We would just stop their traffic. It would be them who would start shooting. So, I don't know. But it's never discussed for good reasons. That's my Hawkwings, so sorry.
Thanks.
And super quick from me, I think that even if the ceasefire takes place, which is still possible eventually this year or the next year, the question is that we heard a lot about how Russia will use it, which is true, and we should be ready for that. And the question is how we will use it with the West. With the long-term thinking and more collaboration with Ukraine, we could basically learn the good lessons from South Korea, for example, or Israel, and we could use the ceasefire to our advantage, to the advantage of our security in Ukraine as well, if we're ready to commit long-term to collaboration and support of each other.
Well, so I think that we have a very straightforward vision of what are the conditions, what shall we do, and also what else should be discussed further. Please help me with the warm applauses to our speakers today, to thank them for the discussion.
And I think that applause goes for you also, Lina. Thank you for excellent moderating. You know, we usually say it's never going to be so easy and cheap to stop Russia than now. It's just going to be more difficult and more expensive. It would have been even cheaper and easier a year ago, but you know, it's just going to be more difficult. They need to be stopped right now. And I also listened to the touching words of you, and you've seen the brutality of the war without a filter. Tomorrow we're opening an exhibition, photo exhibition over here. It's called Do Not Forget. And it's just urging to not to forget, but the purpose is to unite. You will see the brutal truth mixed with art photos from the most famous art photograph school in Ukraine, where students have sent pictures to us. And you will see pictures from famous journalists and photographers of Sweden. So come back, see it. It's so good, it takes almost a day to prepare it. So come back and see this. And I'd like really to thank you. This has been very moving to listen to. And especially thank you to you two from Ukraine for what you're doing and what you do for your people. And you know we're with you. You feel that with a very warm applause right now.